Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. And this week we're taking a look at a truly iconic guitar that, I guess you could say, was Fender's first real failure. Of course talking about the Jazzmaster. Now, to say that the 1950s was Fender's decade would be something of an understatement. After the company's official formation in 1946, it would only be 4 years until their first foray into the world of electric guitar design, with the grand unveiling of the Esquire at NAMM in 1950, a single pickup version of a guitar that we would soon come to know and love as the Telecaster, the world's first commercially available solid body electric guitar. Some 4 years later would see the introduction of the Stratocaster, the biggest selling electric guitar design of all time. And some 70 plus years on, two designs that would ultimately prove to be pretty ubiquitous. But this wasn't necessarily the plan. Despite a period of innovation and design that would ultimately prove to be amongst the most groundbreaking in musical instrument design history, Fender wanted in on a market share that as of yet had eluded them: jazz guitar players. Somewhat ironically, whilst Gibson were busy chasing down Fender's solid-body electric success with the introduction of the Les Paul in 1952, Fender were trying to muscle in on a market that traditionally had belonged to Gibson with their hollow-body arch tops, and thus 1958 saw the introduction of a guitar that Fender billed as America's finest electric guitar, the Jazzmaster. Now, today's particular Jazzmaster dates back to 1961 and is currently for sale here in the UK at Cheltenham's ATB Guitars for a cool £14,000. Stick all the relevant links down in the description box should you be feeling flush. Now, chief amongst the Jazzmaster's new feature were entirely new, wider single-coil pickups designed to produce a rounder, warmer tone, which, as Leo Fender himself explains, the pickup wasn't so deep. It was wider, thinner and more spaced out. The more spaced out the coil is, the wider the spectrum under the string and the warmer the tone. The Jazzmaster also featured a new tone circuit, an idea which could actually be traced back to the late 1940s and belonged to Forrest White, Fender's manufacturing manager. After White watched Alvino Ray, pioneering electric guitar player, at a gig in Ohio, struggling to switch between his lead and rhythm settings. When Alvino later visited the Fender factory, White informed him that he may have found a solution. Now, in addition to the master controls, which govern both pickups, the two roller wheels and slide switch on a Jazzmaster offered access to a preset sound. When the switch is down, in its lead position, the guitar is controlled solely by its usual master volume and tone controls, as well as the three-way selector. But when the switch is up, in the rhythm position, it's routed through lower value potentiometers, specifically 50K as opposed to the 1 meg potentiometers in the lead circuit. As I said, the genesis of the idea can be traced back to the late 1940s, and you can see Fender trying to implement such design on the early Esquires with the dead tone, essentially giving you access to a preset sound where all of the tone was rolled off, but of course with the roller wheels on the Jazzmaster giving you infinitely more flexibility, as well as a new floating tremolo system with a much smoother action than its sister Stratocaster, courtesy of a single spring mounted underneath the tailpiece. The Jazzmaster also offered an innovative offset waist body design. That's the idea behind which was to make the guitar more comfortable playing while sitting down. Again, a nod to its intended, rather sedate audience. A patent for this idea was filed in January of 1958, eventually being granted in November of 1960, with subsequent patents also being filed for both the Jazzmaster's design and its floating tremolo system. However, arguably the biggest change would come in the form of the Rosewood fingerboard. Slab Rosewood fingerboards glued to the customary maple neck, but again undoubtedly a nod to the target audience's expectations of jazz guitar. The brand new model debuted in Fender's 1958 catalogue, replacing the Stratocaster as their flagship model, retailing at a cool $329, roughly $3,300 in today's money. This compared to $275.50 that a Strat would set you back. Now, despite Fender's best efforts, to quote 5 Watt World's Keith Williams, the Jazzmaster just seemed to be an answer to a question that the jazz world, quite honestly, hadn't asked. And as such, you kind of see it as the fledgling company's first real misstep. Turns out the Jazzmaster wasn't really a master of jazz. Despite its positively lukewarm reception by the jazz guitar purists, Joe Pass's very brief rotation being the only real notable exception, the Jazzmaster did find unlikely favour with the burgeoning surf guitar scene that was swelling up out of California in the late 1950s and breaking across the US in the early 1960s. Its snap-to-smooth preset capabilities, courtesy of its lead rhythm switch, finding particular favour with the Venture's Bob Bogle, with this smash number 2 hit being heard across the US in the summer of 1960. However, the surf music explosion was relatively short-lived, and despite the likes of Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton being fleetingly pictured with Jazzmasters, the model increasingly fell into obscurity in the wake of CBS takeover of Fender, ultimately leading to its discontinuation in 1980. Just as, ironically, it was finding favour on both sides of the pond with the new wave bands. Elvis Costello, of course, having traded in his Telecaster for what would become his signature Jazzmaster during the recording process of his debut record, My Aim Is True. Of course, that guitar then being featured in pretty much every subsequent music video. In the very same year, 1977, television's Tom Verlaine put his 58 Jazzmaster to brilliant use on the band's debut record, Marquee Moon. And of course, it wouldn't be long until Sonic Youth Thurston Moore and Lee Ranaldo would be seen armed with a pair of Jazzmasters, thus cementing its place as the alternative guitar of choice. Of course, in the years that followed, it's not uncommon to see the likes of Dinosaur Jr.'s Jay Mascis, My Bloody Valentine's Kevin Shields and Belinda Butcher, The Cars' Rick Ocasek, to Wilco's Nels Klein and Jeff Tweedy, to the Cure's Robert Smith, to the Flaming Lips' Wayne Coyne, all armed with a Jazzmaster. Fender would finally reissue the Jazzmaster in 1999, and unsurprisingly, it's been an integral part of their core lineup ever since. It may not have revolutionised jazz guitar in the way that was expected, or in the way that the Strat and the Tele did for popular music, but ultimately, it is a truly incredible design, and one that just took a little while to find its feet. As ever, I'm Chris Buck, you're watching Friday Fretworks. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already. I'll see you next week for another episode. Cheers guys, take care, see you soon.